The applause was deafening. 130 people were on their feet, clapping enthusiastically for Ethan Calloway, the charismatic vice president who had just unveiled my life's work to a room full of investors, board members, and executives. I sat frozen at my table, my champagne untouched, as a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. My heart hammered against my ribs, not Neo, from anxiety, but from pure, unadulterated betrayal. The pitch deck displayed on the massive screen behind him, I built that. The predictive algorithm he was proudly explaining as his brainchild, I had spent 18 grueling months developing it from scratch, line by meticulous line of code, through countless sleepless nights and weekend marathons fueled by nothing but determination and my unwavering belief in what this technology could achieve. Innovation like this, Ethan declared with a self-satisfied smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, requires leadership with vision, and that's what I brought to Lunaris. The crowd erupted in renewed cheers. My name wasn't mentioned once. I glanced around the elegantly decorated ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza in downtown Boston. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with delicate orchid arrangements. The who's who of the tech industry mingled with potential investors, all dressed in their finest attire. This annual gala was Lunaris Systems' biggest night of the year, a chance to showcase innovation and secure funding for the coming fiscal year. And there I was, Samantha Ellis, wearing a modest midnight dye blue dress I'd spent too much on, watching someone else take credit for my creation. As the audience continued their standing ovation, Ethan turned toward me with a mocking glance and spoke into the microphone. And of course, we all need team players. Sam here, he gestured at me without warmth, has been very cooperative. Laughter rippled through the crowd, a few uncomfortable chuckles from those who perhaps sensed something wasn't quite right. I didn't clap. I couldn't bring myself to perform that final act of submission. He noticed. That's when he walked over to my table, still holding the microphone, and leaned down. Why so serious, Sam? His voice carried through the sound system. I'd expect a little more gratitude. Another smirk, another round of stifled laughs. That moment broke something fundamental inside me. Not because I had lost credit for my work, though that stung more than I could express, but because he genuinely thought I would stay quiet, that I would continue to be the invisible woman who created while others presented, that I would accept being erased from my own story. I calmly stood up, smoothed down my dress, nodded politely to those at my table, and walked toward the exit. No dramatic scene, no tears, just steady steps carrying me away from the spotlight I never sought but had now been deliberately denied. Sam? My colleague Deshaun Hill caught my arm as I passed his table. His eyes reflected concern. You okay? I will be, I said quietly, gently removing his hand. Enjoy the rest of the evening. The grand ballroom doors felt impossibly heavy as I pushed through them into the relative quiet of the hotel corridor. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked, each step bringing clarity to my thoughts. The muffled sounds of renewed applause followed me, but they seemed distant now, belonging to another world. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths. Images flashed through my mind, the countless late nights. At the office, the weekends sacrificed, the endless cups of coffee. Project Icarus, I had named it in my files. A creation that could soar to incredible heights if handled properly. My creation. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone. Not from fear, but from an unexpected sense of liberation. For years, I had accepted my role as the quiet genius behind the scenes. I had convinced myself that good work would eventually be recognized, that integrity would prevail in the end. How naive I had been. The phone felt cool against my palm as I scrolled through my contacts. One name stood out. Tina Blake, senior investment partner at Horizon Capital. We'd met briefly 3 months ago when she visited Lunaris for a preliminary funding discussion. She'd asked insightful questions about the project. Questions that told me she understood the technology on a fundamental level. I remembered how her gaze had lingered on me rather than on Ethan, who had been presenting that day too. After that meeting, she had discreetly handed me her card. If you ever want to discuss your work in more independent settings, she had said quietly, I'd be interested in hearing directly from the creator. I had tucked the card away, flattered but loyal to Lunaris. Now I pulled it from my clutch and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Tina Blake. Ms. Blake, this is Samantha Ellis from Lunaris Systems. My voice was steadier than I expected. You mentioned wanting to hear about Project Icarus directly from its creator. Is that offer still valid? A pause. I'm actually at your company gala right now, Ms. Ellis. I just watched a rather interesting presentation about what I believe is your project. Yes, I said simply. That's why I'm calling. Another pause. Where are you right now? In the hallway outside the ballroom. Stay there. I'll find you. Less than a minute later, Tina Blake appeared, elegant in a tailored black suit. Her expression, unreadable. She gestured to a quiet seating area around the corner. I've been watching the situation at Lunaris for some time, she said once we were seated. The disconnect between who presents and who creates. It's concerning for investors. I met her gaze directly. I built Project Icarus from the ground up. Every algorithm, every line of code, every prediction model. I have proof. Timestamped development logs, backup drives, video recordings of my work sessions. Ethan Callaway has never written a line of code for this project. She nodded, unsurprised. And what exactly are you proposing now, Ms. Ellis? I took a deep breath. The moment felt surreal, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that stepping off would forever change the trajectory of my life. I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. But I know I can't go back in there and pretend this didn't happen. Tina's eyes gleamed with something that looked like respect. What if I told you Horizon Capital would be interested in backing Project Icarus, but only with its true creator at the helm? My heart raced. What exactly are you suggesting? I have contracts in my briefcase. We came prepared tonight to make an offer to Lunaris, but we can modify those terms quickly. She checked her watch. Give me 30 minutes. Can you send me those development logs and proof of your work in the meantime? I nodded, already reaching for my phone to access my cloud storage. One more thing, Samantha, Tina said, standing up. Are you prepared for what happens next? Once this is done, there's no going back. I thought about the applause still echoing from the ballroom, about Ethan's smug smile, about 18 months of my life claimed by someone else in the span of a 30-minute presentation. I'm ready, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. It's time to set the record straight. 1 year earlier, the Lunaris Systems office hummed with the familiar sounds of a Monday morning. The hiss of the espresso machine, the muted tapping of keyboards, the occasional burst of laughter from the break room. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., earlier than most, and settled at my desk with a steaming cup of coffee, ready to dive into the mountain of data waiting for my analysis. At 33, I had built a comfortable niche for myself at Lunaris. Senior project manager wasn't the most glamorous title, but it gave me access to the resources I needed and a degree of autonomy I valued. I preferred building to presenting, creating to showcasing. Let others handle the spotlight. I was happiest in the glow of my monitor, teasing patterns from chaos. Early bird catches the worm, huh, Sam? I looked up to see Deshaun Hill sliding into his chair at the desk opposite mine. At 28, he was younger than me, but equally dedicated to his work as a software engineer. Unlike me, though, Deshaun wasn't content to remain invisible. He had ambition, a voice he wasn't afraid to use, and a natural charisma that drew people to him. More like the early bird avoids the morning traffic, I replied with a smile. Any progress on the distribution model? He nodded, spinning his chair to face me. Got it running at 92%. Accuracy. Not perfect, but better than yesterday. That's impressive. Want me to take a look at the outliers? Would you? That would be... Good morning, team. The booming voice of Ethan Callaway interrupted our conversation. He strode through the open plan office, immaculate in a tailored gray suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. At 45, Ethan had the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. As vice president of product development, he technically oversaw our department, though his actual contributions to development were minimal at best. He stopped at our workstation cluster. Big day today. Board presentation at 2 p.m. I'll need those quarterly projections, Sam. They're ready, I said, pulling up the file. I've included 3 alternative scenarios based on different market variables the model suggests. Just send me the summary slides. He cut in, already checking his phone. Keep it simple for the board. They don't need all the technical details. I nodded, swallowing my frustration. The technical details were precisely what made our predictive models unique, but Ethan preferred glossy overviews to substantive analysis. Oh, and that chart you created for user adoption rates? He added. Very insightful work. I'll be highlighting that today. Actually, I began, I think it would be helpful if we also showed, trust me, Sam, he said with a patronizing smile. I know how to present to the board. You focus on what you do best. the background work. With that, he continued his circuit of the office, dispensing similar instructions to other team members. Deshawn raised an eyebrow. Still letting him take credit for your insights? I shrugged. He's the VP. It's his job to present to the board. There's presenting, and then there's claiming other people's work as his own. That chart took you 2 weeks to develop. The methodology was revolutionary. It's fine, Deshawn. I don't need the recognition. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. But you deserve it, and he knows it. Why do you think he keeps you off the presentation circuit? You're a threat. I laughed at the absurdity of the suggestion. I'm hardly a threat. I'm not even interested in his job. Maybe not. But you're smarter than him, and that scares the hell out of people like Ethan Callaway. Before I could respond, my computer pinged with a meeting request. From Kimberly Voss, CEO of Lunaris. My stomach tightened. Direct meetings with Kimberly were rare and usually intense. Speak of the devil, Deshawn muttered, seeing the notification. The Ice Queen summons. She's not that bad, I said, though without much conviction. Kimberly's reputation for cold calculation was well earned. At 52, she had steered Lunaris through turbulent markets with unwavering precision, if not warmth. Exactly at 10 a.m., I knocked on the door of Kimberly's corner office. Come in, her clipped voice commanded. The office was minimalist and immaculate, all glass, chrome, and white surfaces. Kimberly sat behind a sleek desk, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression unreadable as always. Samantha, sit. She gestured to the chair across from her. I've been reviewing the predictive analytics department's output. Your models consistently outperform industry standards. Thank you, I said, surprised by the rare compliment. I'm interested in where you see this technology going. Specifically, do you think we could develop a more comprehensive forecasting system? Something that would set us apart in the market? My pulse quickened. For months, I'd been quietly working on exactly that, a revolutionary algorithm that could transform how businesses anticipated market shifts. I hesitated only briefly before deciding to share my vision. Actually, I've been developing something along those lines. A multivariable predictive model that incorporates both structured and unstructured data sources. It's still experimental, but the initial results are promising. Kimberly leaned forward slightly, the first sign of genuine interest I'd seen from her. How promising. In controlled tests, it's predicting market shifts 3 to 6 months ahead with 87% accuracy. Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the Kimberly Voss equivalent of astonishment. And does this project have a name? I smiled. I call it Project Icarus. It can soar higher than anything we've built before if we're careful. Intriguing. She made a note on her tablet. I want you to continue this work. Priority access to computing resources, whatever you need. But keep it quiet for now. Competition in this space is fierce. Of course. Should I brief Ethan on the details? Something flickered across her face. So quickly I almost missed it. Let's keep this between us for the moment. Ethan has enough on his plate with current product lines. I nodded, both thrilled and slightly uncomfortable. Working directly with the CEO was an unexpected opportunity, but sidestepping my immediate supervisor felt vaguely disloyal. As I stood to leave, Kimberly added, "This could be significant for Lunaris, Samantha, and for your career here." Walking back to my desk, I felt a surge of excitement. Project Icarus had been my passion project, developed during evening hours and weekends. Now it had official sanction, and the CEO's attention. So, Deshawn asked as I returned, are you fired or promoted? Neither, just a project discussion. Must be some project to warrant a private audience with Voss. I smiled enigmatically. It could be. We'll see. What? I didn't realize then, what I couldn't have known, was that I had just set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in that fateful night at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, when everything I had built would be claimed by another, and everything I thought I knew about loyalty and recognition would be shattered forever. Over the next 6 months, Project Icarus consumed my life. I arrived at the office before dawn and often left well after midnight, fueled by a potent mixture of ambition and genuine belief in what I was creating. The algorithm was evolving from theoretical concept to practical application, learning patterns and making predictions that even I found startling in their accuracy. Kimberly approved a small, dedicated server cluster for my use, hidden in the budget under exploratory market analysis, and granted me access to premium data sources normally reserved for executive projects. I worked mostly alone, though occasionally I'd bring Deshawn in for specific coding challenges. His expertise in neural networks proved invaluable for optimizing certain processes. "This is revolutionary," he told me one night as we watched the system correctly predict a minor market correction 3 months out. "You realize what you've built, right? This isn't just a better mousetrap. This is a whole new way of catching mice." I smiled at his enthusiasm. "It still needs refinement. The confidence intervals for long-range predictions are wider than I'd like." "Always the perfectionist." He shook his head. "Sam, companies would pay millions for this system even in its current state." "That's the plan," I said. "Eventually." What I didn't share with Deshawn was my growing unease about the project's governance. Kimberly had remained interested but distant, reviewing my progress reports with clinical detachment. And increasingly, Ethan was finding reasons to hover near my workstation, asking questions that seemed casual but probed for specific details. "Just checking in on my team," he'd say with that practiced smile. "Anything exciting happening I should know about?" I kept my answers vague and technical enough to make his eyes glaze over, but I noticed how he lingered, how his gaze drifted to my monitor whenever I opened certain files. The first real warning sign came during a department meeting in March. Ethan was presenting quarterly highlights to the team when he unveiled a slide titled "Future Directions Predictive Analytics Evolution." "I've been developing a concept," he announced, "for a comprehensive forecasting system that would integrate multiple data streams into a unified predictive model." My blood ran cold. He was describing Project Icarus, not in technical detail, but the conceptual framework was unmistakably mine. Deshawn shot me a look across the conference table. I kept my expression neutral, even as my hands clenched beneath the table. After the meeting, Deshawn cornered me in the break room. "Tell me you heard that." "I heard it," I said quietly, mindful of potential eavesdroppers. "That was your project, your concept." Word for word. I stirred my coffee slowly. "It's a logical evolution of our current systems." Maybe he came to similar conclusions independently. Deshawn snorted. "Yeah, and maybe I'm secretly a Kardashian. Sam, he's positioning himself for something big, and you're laying the foundation. What would you have me do? Accuse the VP of stealing my ideas in front of the entire department?" "You could start by not being so damn accommodating," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "At least tell Kimberly." I hesitated. "Kimberly knows it's my project." "Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Ethan is making his move while your head's down in code." His words haunted me that evening as I continued working late. The office was quiet, most employees having departed hours earlier. I was deep in debugging mode when a shadow fell across my desk. "Still here, Sam?" Ethan's voice made me jump. "Just finishing up," I said, discreetly minimizing my Project Icarus windows. He pulled up a chair, sitting too close for comfort. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said in your last status report, about integrating unstructured data into the prediction models." I felt a chill. I had never shared a Project Icarus status report with him. "I've expanded on that concept," he continued smoothly. "Added some refinements. I think we're onto something potentially game-changing." "We?" I asked quietly. He smiled, not quite reaching his eyes. "The department, the company. We're all working toward the same goals, aren't we?" Before I could respond, he stood. "Don't stay too late. It's important to maintain work-life balance." As he walked away, I reopened my files and quickly checked the access logs. Someone had viewed my project documents using Kimberly's credentials 3 days earlier, at a time when I knew she was in London for meetings. The next morning, I implemented stricter security protocols on all my files, dual authentication and encrypted access logs that would notify me of any attempted entry. I also began keeping a separate development record on a personal external drive that never left my possession. "Paranoid much?" Deshawn asked when he noticed my new security measures. "Cautious," I corrected. "The stakes are getting higher." April brought a new complication. Kimberly announced that Lunaris would host its annual technology gala in September, earlier than usual, with a special focus on breakthrough, innovations that will define our next decade. "This year's event will be crucial," she told the executive team during a meeting I was invited to attend. "Our current funding round closes in October. We need to show substantial innovation to secure the terms we want." Her gaze drifted briefly to me before continuing. "We'll be showcasing our best work. Only finished products, nothing experimental or uncertain." The message seemed clear. Project Icarus wouldn't be featured. I felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. Part of me had hoped for recognition, but the practical side of me knew the project needed more refinement. As the meeting dispersed, Ethan caught up with me in the hallway. Shame about the gala guidelines. Your predictive model shows promise. I looked at him sharply. Which model are you referring to? He smiled blandly. The quarterly forecasting system, of course. What else would I mean? 2 weeks later, I was copied on an email thread about gala preparations. Buried in the agenda was an item that made my stomach drop. Ethan Callaway to present next-generation predictive analytics platform. 45 minutes. I immediately went to Kimberly's office, but her assistant informed me she was in back-to-back meetings all day. Instead, I found myself knocking on Ethan's door with a calm I didn't feel. "Sam, come in." He gestured expansively, the picture of a welcoming supervisor. "I saw the gala agenda," I said without preamble. "What predictive analytics platform will you be presenting?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Oh, just some ideas I've been developing. Nothing concrete yet. Because it sounds remarkably like Project Icarus." His expression hardened slightly. "Project Icarus is a company initiative, Samantha, not your personal science project. An initiative I conceived and have been building single-handedly for months." He sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. "This is how business works. Ideas flow up. Execution flows down. The conceptual framework is what matters to investors, not who wrote which line of code. And who will be credited with that conceptual framework?" I pressed. He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "Leadership requires visibility, Sam. If you wanted recognition, you should have pursued management instead of burying yourself in data models." I left his office seething, but determined. That night, I worked until dawn, accelerating development timelines I had carefully crafted. If Ethan planned to present my work, I would ensure it was so unmistakably mine that no one could credibly claim otherwise. What I didn't realize was how thoroughly he had already laid the groundwork for his theft, or that Kimberly Voss might be complicit in the plan. Summer arrived with a suffocating heatwave and mounting tension. I had become increasingly isolated at Lunaris, working longer hours, speaking less in meetings, and keeping my progress on Project Icarus closely guarded. The algorithm was now functioning at 93% accuracy for medium-range predictions, with the interface polished and user-friendly enough for non-technical executives to navigate. In July, Kimberly finally granted me the meeting I'd been requesting for weeks. "Project Icarus exceeds all initial benchmarks," I reported, displaying the latest results on her office monitor. "It's ready for limited deployment and testing." She watched the demonstration with that same unreadable expression. "Impressive work, Samantha, but I'm concerned about the timeline for full implementation. The core functionality is complete," I explained. "We could begin client trials immediately." "That's not what I meant." She tapped her pen against the desk. "The gala is 8 weeks away. Ethan has already begun preparing his presentation materials." The casual confirmation of my fears hit like a physical blow. "His presentation? For my project?" "For Lunaris's project," she corrected smoothly, "which Ethan will be overseeing as we move into the commercialization phase." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You're removing me from my own creation?" "Not removing. Transitioning to a support role. Your technical expertise will remain invaluable, but Ethan has the presentation skills and executive presence we need for the investor showcase." "With all due respect," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "this project represents 18 months of my work, my innovation, my solution to problems nobody else was even addressing." Kimberly's expression hardened. "And you've been compensated for that work with a very competitive salary. Lunaris owns the intellectual property. The board has decided that Ethan will lead the project publicly. That decision is final." I left her office in a daze, barely, registering the concerned glance from her assistant. The betrayal felt complete and carefully orchestrated. Kimberly had isolated my project from the beginning, not to protect it from competition as I'd naively believed, but to control the narrative around its development. Deshaun found me in the empty conference room where I'd retreated to collect myself. "That bad, huh?" He sat beside me, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "Worse." I explained the situation in a hollow voice. He wasn't surprised. "I've been hearing rumors. Ethan's been dropping hints about his breakthrough project to the marketing team. They're already drafting press materials. Using what information? He doesn't understand half the technical specifications. Does it matter? He has your reports, your documentation, enough to fake his way through with technical writers filling in the gaps." I buried my face in my hands. I was so stupid. No, Deshawn said firmly. You were loyal. There's a difference. That afternoon, I received an email from Human Resources requesting my presence at a project transition meeting the following morning. The message copied both Ethan and Kimberly. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I meticulously documented everything related to Project Icarus. My initial concept notes from 18 months prior, development logs, version histories, video recordings of coding sessions I'd made for troubleshooting purposes, even the whiteboard photos from early brainstorming sessions. I compiled it all onto an encrypted drive and sent a copy to my personal email. The HR meeting was as clinical as it was degrading. Janet Wilson, the HR director, explained that I would be transitioning primary project management responsibilities to Ethan while retaining my role as technical consultant. In practice, this meant surrendering direct control of the codebase I had created while remaining available to fix any problems Ethan's team couldn't handle. This organizational adjustment reflects Lunaris's strategic priorities. Janet recited from what was clearly a prepared statement. Your contributions have been noted and are appreciated. Ethan sat beside her, his expression one of practiced sympathy. I know change can be difficult, Sam, but I'll make sure your work is represented accurately. I looked directly at him. Will my name be on the presentation? A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. The presentation will reflect Lunaris's corporate structure. As VP, I represent the department's collective achievements. So that's a no, I said flatly. The meeting concluded with me signing acknowledgement forms, not agreement, merely confirmation that the directive had been communicated. As we left the conference room, Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder. Don't take this personally, Sam. It's just business. I removed his hand. If you're going to claim my work as your own, at least have the decency not to pretend it's for my benefit. The weeks before the gala passed in a blur of quiet rage and strategic planning. On the surface, I complied with the transition, providing documentation, answering technical questions, even reviewing preliminary presentation materials. But I also prepared for contingencies, establishing connections outside Lunaris, and documenting every instance where Ethan misrepresented my work as his own. 2 weeks before the event, investors began visiting Lunaris for preview meetings. Among them was Tina Blake from Horizon Capital, a woman with a reputation for shrewd assessment of both technology and the people behind it. During her visit, I was summoned to answer technical questions after Ethan stumbled over the algorithm's methodology. I explained the concept clearly, watching Tina's eyes sharpen with interest. Fascinating approach, she said when I finished. How long have you been developing this model, Ms. Ellis? Before I could answer, Ethan stepped in. The department has been exploring these concepts for some time. Sam has been instrumental in implementing certain technical aspects. Tina's gaze flickered between us, assessing. After the meeting, she approached me in the hallway. Ms. Ellis, do you have a moment? We stepped into an empty office and she handed me her business card. If you ever want to discuss your work in more independent settings, I'd be interested in hearing directly from the creator. I looked at the card, then back at her. What makes you think I'm the creator? She smiled slightly. 20 years in this industry teaches you to recognize the difference between those who build and those who claim. Your VP is clearly the latter. I tucked the card into my pocket, not yet ready to cross that line, but grateful for the acknowledgement. The evening before the gala, I stayed late, making final adjustments to the system, ostensibly to ensure everything would run smoothly for Ethan's demonstration. In reality, I was implementing a subtle signature into the codebase, an undeniable proof of authorship that would be invisible to casual observers, but unmistakable to any technical expert who examined the system closely. As I finally prepared to leave, Deshawn appeared in the doorway. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded. I will be. He hesitated. Whatever you're planning, I've got your back. Just say the word. I managed a small smile. Thank you. But this is something I need to handle myself. What I didn't tell him was that I had already made my decision. Tomorrow night, one way or another, the truth about Project Icarus would be revealed, and neither Ethan Calloway nor Kimberly Voss were prepared for what would follow. The day of the gala arrived with perfect September weather, clear skies and a gentle breeze that belied the storm brewing inside me. I spent the morning at home, rehearsing what I might say or do when the moment came. By afternoon, I had settled on an approach that felt right, dignified restraint rather than dramatic confrontation. I arrived at the Fairmont Copley Plaza fashionably late, slipping into the pre-gala reception with minimal notice. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a technological showcase, with elegant lighting and interactive displays highlighting Lunaris's achievements. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while Boston's tech elite mingled with investors from across the country. There she is! Deshawn appeared at my side, dapper in a charcoal suit. I was beginning to think you might bail. And miss the show? Never. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, but didn't drink. How are you holding up? Surprisingly calm, I admitted. There's something liberating about reaching your breaking point. His eyes narrowed with concern. Sam, what exactly are you planning? I offered a non-committal smile. I'm just here to observe, like everyone else. Before he could press further, the lights dimmed briefly, the signal for guests to move into the main ballroom for dinner and presentations. I found my assigned table near the middle of the room, neither prominently placed nor hidden away. Ethan naturally was seated at the head table alongside Kimberly and the board members. Throughout the dinner, I picked at my food and engaged in minimal conversation with my table mates, mostly mid-level executives from partner companies who knew little about Project Icarus. Across the room, I spotted Tina Blake at a table with other investors, her expression attentive but reserved. After dessert was served, Kimberly Voss took the stage, elegant in a silver evening gown that matched her hair. She welcomed the guests, highlighted Lunaris's growth over the past year, and then moved to the main event. Tonight, we're privileged to unveil an innovation that will redefine predictive analytics for the next decade, she announced, her voice carrying through the perfect acoustics of the ballroom. A breakthrough that represents Lunaris's commitment to visionary leadership in the tech space. My stomach tightened. The familiar slides, my slides with superficial design changes, appeared on the massive screen behind her. To present this revolutionary system, please welcome our Vice President of Product Development, Ethan Callaway. Applause filled the room as Ethan strode confidently to the podium, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo. He beamed at the audience, perfectly at ease in the spotlight. Thank you, Kimberly. Good evening, everyone. His voice carried the practiced charm that had served his career so well. What I'm about to share with you began as a vision, a question, really. What if we could harness the chaotic streams of market data to predict not just obvious trends, but subtle shifts months before they manifest? I watched, stone-faced, as he walked the audience through the very problem statement I had written in my initial project proposal. Word for word in some passages, thinly paraphrased in others. The solution required innovative thinking, he continued, advancing to the next slide. A multi-layered approach that combines structured and unstructured data, sources through a proprietary algorithm we've developed. For the next 20 minutes, I endured the systematic theft of my intellectual creation. Ethan presented the architecture, methodology, and results of Project Icarus with the confidence of someone who understood the underlying principles, which he didn't. Several times he glossed over technical details I knew would have prompted questions from the savvier investors in the room. I noticed Tina Blake watching him with narrowed eyes, occasionally making notes on her tablet. The market implications are substantial, Ethan declared, reaching his crescendo. Early tests show prediction accuracy exceeding 90% for events 3 months out, a benchmark unmatched in the industry. The audience murmured appreciatively. He had them captivated. In practical terms, this means Lunaris can offer clients unprecedented visibility into market movements, competitive positioning, and emerging opportunities. He paused for effect. We call this system Prometheus, bringing the fire of foresight to modern business. I almost laughed aloud. He'd even changed my mythological naming convention, from Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, to Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods. The irony was almost too perfect. Innovation like this, he said, his voice swelling with pride, requires leadership with vision, and that's what I brought to Lunaris. The audience erupted in applause. Many stood, genuinely impressed by what they'd seen. And why wouldn't they be? The system was revolutionary. The fact that the man presenting it couldn't explain how it worked if his life depended on it was invisible to them. As the ovation continued, Ethan's gaze found mine across the ballroom. He smiled, not with triumph but with warning, a silent reminder of the power dynamics at play. Then he turned to the microphone again. And of course, we all need team players. Sam here, he gestured toward me without warmth, has been very cooperative. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few uncomfortable chuckles from those close enough to sense my rigid posture and unsmiling face. I didn't clap. My hands remained folded in my lap, my expression neutral but determined. He noticed. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, perhaps, or concern that I wasn't playing along with the charade. He walked toward my table, microphone still in hand, and leaned down. "Why so serious, Sam?" His voice carried through the sound system. I'd expect a little more gratitude. Another smirk. Another round of stifled laughs. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Not rage, though I certainly felt it, but clarity. I saw Ethan Callaway for exactly what he was. A man so insecure in his own abilities that he needed to steal others' work to maintain his status. A man who thought nothing of publicly humiliating a colleague to reinforce his dominance. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. "Excuse me," I said quietly to my table mates. Without looking at Ethan, I walked steadily toward the exit. No dramatic scene, no tears. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had finally recognized her own worth. As I passed to Sean's table, he caught my arm. "Sam, you okay?" "I will be," I replied, gently removing his hand. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." The grand ballroom doors felt heavy as I pushed through them into the relative quiet of the corridor beyond. The muffled sounds of renewed applause followed me, but they seemed distant now, belonging to another world. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, feeling surprisingly light. Despite everything, I reached for my phone and scrolled to Tina Blake's contact. The call that would change everything. 5 minutes later, Tina herself appeared in the hallway. "That," she said without preamble, "was one of the most blatant instances of intellectual theft I've witnessed in 20 years of investing." I nodded. "Do you still want to hear from the actual creator?" "More than ever." She gestured to a quiet seating area around the corner. "But first, what exactly do you want, Ms. Ellis? Revenge? Recognition? Or something else entirely?" I considered her question carefully. "I want my work to matter. I want it to be used as it was intended. And yes, I want my name attached to it." Tina studied me. "And if achieving that means leaving Lunaris, then I leave," I said simply. "The project matters more than the company." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "I have contracts in my briefcase. We came prepared tonight to make an offer to Lunaris, but we can modify those terms. Quickly." She checked her watch. "Give me 30 minutes. Can you send me those development logs and proof of your work in the meantime?" I was already reaching for my phone. "Everything is ready." "One more thing, Samantha," Tina said, rising from her seat. "Are you prepared for what happens next? Once this is done, there's no going back." I thought about the applause still echoing from the ballroom, about Ethan's smug smile, about 18 months of my life claimed by someone else in the span of a 30-minute presentation. "I'm ready," I said, feeling the steel in my own voice. "It's time." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of focused activity. Seated in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, I transferred comprehensive documentation to Tina's secure server. Timestamps, development logs, video recordings of coding sessions, even emails between Kimberly and myself discussing the project's inception. The evidence was overwhelming and incontrovertible. Meanwhile, Tina worked her phone like a virtuoso, speaking in hushed but urgent tones to colleagues who apparently were already at the gala. I caught fragments. Intellectual property rights, prior claim, exclusive licensing agreement, and immediate decision required. At precisely 9:45 p.m., she ended her final call and turned to me with a look of satisfaction. "It's arranged. The other Horizon partners are on board, as are 2 additional investment groups who were already skeptical of Lunaris's management practices." "What exactly is arranged?" I asked, both nervous and exhilarated. "You'll see." She stood, straightening her impeccable suit. "Are you ready to return to the ballroom?" I hesitated. "What should I do?" "Nothing." She smiled slightly. "Just watch. This is the part where you get to observe the consequences of other people's choices." We walked back toward the ballroom together. Through the doors, I could hear Ethan still holding court, now taking questions from the audience about his innovation. His voice carried that same smug confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. Tina paused at the entrance. "Wait here for a moment. My colleagues will join me shortly." Within minutes, 3 distinguished executives approached. 2 men and a woman, all carrying tablet devices and leather portfolios. I recognized one as Jacob Bennett, founding partner of Horizon Capital. His presence suggested this intervention had escalated to the highest levels. "Ms. Ellis," he acknowledged with a nod. "Tina has briefed us. Quite a situation you found yourself in." "Indeed," I replied, unsure what else to say. "Well, let's put it right, shall we?" He turned to the others. Documents ready? They nodded in unison, expressions grave but determined. Tina rejoined us. Perfect timing. He's just wrapping up the Q&A. The double doors to the ballroom swung open dramatically as the five of us entered. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered, heads turned, and Ethan Zhao voice trailed off mid-sentence. We walked directly down the center aisle toward the stage, our purposeful stride making it clear this was no casual interruption. Kimberly Voss rose from her seat, alarm evident in her usually composed features. Tina, is everything all right? Not exactly, Kimberly, Tina replied, her voice carrying in the suddenly silent room. We need to address an urgent matter. Regarding the presentation we just witnessed. Ethan stepped forward, attempting to regain control. Perhaps we could discuss this privately after the event? I'm afraid this can't wait, Jacob Bennett stated, his authoritative tone brooking no argument. It concerns intellectual property rights and investment terms. By now, the entire room was watching with rapt attention. The investors spread out, placing their portfolios on the head table directly in front of Kimberly and the board members. What is the meaning of this? Kimberly demanded, her composure slipping. We've received compelling evidence, Tina announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, that the system presented tonight, Prometheus as Mr. Calloway called it, was in fact developed by Samantha Ellis, with Mr. Calloway having minimal to no involvement in its creation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Deshawn from his table caught my eye and gave a subtle nod of encouragement. That's absurd, Ethan sputtered, his charm evaporating. Sam is a team member who assisted with technical implementation under my direction. Is that so? Jacob Bennett opened his portfolio and removed a document. We have here a complete development history, including original concept notes dated 18 months ago, showing Ms. Ellis as the sole architect of what was originally called Project Icarus. Another investor stepped forward. We also have video documentation of coding sessions, time-stamped server access logs, and email communications confirming Ms. Ellis as the creator and primary developer. Ethan's face had lost all color. He looked desperately toward Kimberly, who appeared equally shaken. This is an internal matter, Kimberly attempted, addressing the investors with forced calm. Project attribution follows company protocol, and all intellectual property belongs to Lunaris regardless of individual contributions. That's technically correct, Tina conceded, which brings us to the second matter. She produced a contract from her portfolio. Horizon Capital, along with Barrett Investments and Nexus Group, came tonight prepared to offer significant funding based on the innovation presented. However, our terms now include a critical stipulation: exclusive licensing of the predictive analytics system, with Samantha Ellis named as chief architect and granted operational control. The third investor added, "We're prepared to move forward immediately, but only with Ms. Ellis officially recognized as the creator and technical lead." The ballroom had fallen completely silent. Dozens of phones were now recording discreetly, ensuring this moment would live well beyond tonight. Kimberly's expression hardened. This is highly irregular and potentially in breach of existing contractual obligations. Actually, Tina countered smoothly, we've had our legal team review Lunaris's standard employment agreements. While the company owns the intellectual property, there are clear provisions regarding proper attribution of creative work. Mr. Calloway's presentation tonight explicitly claimed personal credit for innovation he did not create, which constitutes misrepresentation to investors. Ethan, now visibly sweating, stepped toward me. Sam, this is ridiculous. We both know the project was a team effort under my leadership. Before I could respond, Deshawn stood up from his table. That's not true, and you know it. I witnessed Sam developing that algorithm from day one. You never wrote a single line of code. Several other developers from my department nodded in agreement, emboldened by Deshawn's statement. Jacob Bennett addressed the board members directly. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice to make tonight. Our collective investment of $160 million depends on honest attribution and proper leadership of this project. We believe Ms. Ellis is essential to its success. One of the board members, a gray-haired woman I recognized as Patricia Winters, looked at Kimberly sharply. Were you aware of this situation, Ms. Voss? Kimberly's hesitation spoke volumes. I would like to speak, I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I stepped forward. All eyes turned to me. I've given nearly 2 years of my life to Project Icarus. I believe in its potential to transform how businesses navigate uncertainty. I'm not interested in public drama or retribution. I paused, meeting Ethan's gaze directly. I'm interested in seeing this technology reach its full potential, with proper recognition for everyone involved in its creation. I turned to the investors. I appreciate your support and your insistence on integrity. If Lunaris is willing to acknowledge the truth and adjust the project leadership accordingly, remain committed to its success. The ball was now in Lunaris's court. Kimberly conferred urgently with board members, while Ethan stood frozen, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before 130 witnesses. After what felt like an eternity, Patricia Winters stood. On behalf of the board, I think we need to address this matter immediately. Ms. Voss, Mr. Calloway, will require your presence in the hotel's executive conference room. Ms. Ellis and the investment representatives as well. She turned to address the stunned audience. We apologize for the interruption. Please enjoy the remainder of the evening. As we filed out of the ballroom, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Deshawn. That, he whispered, was the most badass thing I've ever seen. For the first time that night, I smiled, a genuine smile that reflected not triumph over others, but the reclamation of my own truth. The reckoning had only just begun. The hotel's executive conference room felt like a courtroom as we assembled around the polished mahogany table. The board members sat at one end, expressions grave. Kimberly and Ethan at the other, both visibly shaken but attempting to maintain composure. The investors positioned themselves in the middle, with me beside them, a symbolic arrangement that wasn't lost on anyone present. Patricia Winters, the senior board member, opened the proceedings with characteristic directness. Let's establish the facts first. Ms. Ellis, please explain your role in developing the predictive analytics system presented tonight. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through the project's evolution, from initial concept to functional prototype. I presented documentation chronologically, highlighting key milestones and breakthroughs. My voice remained steady, professional, focused on facts rather than accusations. When I finished, Patricia turned to Ethan. Mr. Calloway, your response? Ethan had recovered some of his poise. While I acknowledged Samantha's technical contributions, the conceptual framework and strategic vision were mine. As department head, I directed the project's development and integration with business objectives. That's simply not true. I interjected, unable to let the lie stand. The concept, methodology, and implementation were all documented in my original proposal, which I submitted before you were ever involved. Tina? Blake slid a folder across the table. Board members might find this email chain illuminating. It shows Ms. Ellis presenting her complete concept to CEO Voss 18 months ago, with Mr. Calloway not included in the communication. Kimberly's expression tightened. As CEO, I delegated oversight responsibilities to Mr. Calloway as the project progressed. This is standard management practice. Delegation is one thing, Jacob Bennett noted. Misattribution is another entirely. The evidence continued to mount. Deshawn had been called in to corroborate my account, bringing additional developers who confirmed my role as the project's sole architect. Technical questions posed by the board revealed Ethan's superficial understanding of the system's core functionality, a damning contrast to my comprehensive knowledge. 3 hours into the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted decisively. What began as a he-said-she-said dispute had transformed into an indefensible case of intellectual appropriation. Patricia Winters removed her reading glasses and addressed Kimberly directly. Ms. Voss, the board is deeply concerned. Beyond the ethical implications, this situation represents significant legal and reputational risk for Lunaris. I understand the board's concerns, Kimberly replied, her voice tight. However, I maintain that project attribution follows organizational hierarchy. Mr. Calloway's presentation may have overemphasized his personal contribution, but he claimed sole authorship of work he didn't create, interrupted another board member, Michael Chen. Before an audience of industry leaders and investors, the distinction matters. As the reality of their situation became unavoidable, both Kimberly and Ethan shifted strategies, from denial to damage control. Perhaps we've had a breakdown in communication, Kimberly suggested. If Ms. Ellis felt her contributions weren't properly recognized, we should certainly address that moving forward. Ethan nodded, eagerly. Absolutely. Sam is a valued team member, and I'd be happy to ensure she receives appropriate credit in future presentations. Their belated concessions rang hollow after months of calculated deception. I remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Jacob Bennett refocused the discussion on the investment offer. Our position remains unchanged. We're prepared to commit significant capital to this technology, but only with Ms. Ellis recognized as chief architect and granted operational control. Patricia Winters looked thoughtful. That presents a challenge to our existing management structure. Perhaps, Tina Blake suggested, this offers an opportunity for Lunaris to create a specialized division focused on predictive technologies, with Ms. Ellis leading that team directly. The negotiation continued past midnight, with proposals and counter-proposals exchanged across the table. Throughout, I maintained a calm demeanor, stating my requirements clearly. Full recognition as the creator of Project Icarus, operational autonomy for future development, and protection from retribution. As dawn approached, we reached a tentative agreement. I would be promoted to Director of Predictive Analytics, reporting directly to the board rather than through Kimberly or Ethan. The project would revert to its original name, Icarus, with all marketing materials updated to reflect accurate attribution. The investment would proceed with modified terms, including performance incentives tied to my continued involvement. The board members stood to signal the meeting's conclusion, but I wasn't quite finished. There's one more thing, I said quietly. Deshaun Hill. I want him as my deputy director, with appropriate compensation and recognition. Patricia Winters nodded. That seems reasonable, given his corroboration tonight. As the room began to clear, Ethan approached me, his expression an uncomfortable mixture of resentment and forced contrition. Sam, I hope we can move forward professionally. No hard feelings? I looked at him evenly. My feelings aren't the issue, Ethan. My work is. As long as you respect one, the other won't be a problem. He retreated, recognizing the boundary I'd established. Kimberly was more direct in her parting words. You've won this round, Samantha. But corporations have long memories. So do I replied simply. The sky was brightening as I finally left the hotel, exhausted but strangely energized. Deshaun had waited in the lobby, dozing in an armchair until I emerged. Well? He asked, blinking awake. Are we employed or unemployed? Employed, I confirmed. With promotions, actually. His eyes widened. No kidding? After all that? The evidence was irrefutable, and the investors were persuasive. We stepped outside into the crisp morning air, Boston just beginning to stir around us. So what happens now? Deshaun asked as we walked toward the nearest coffee shop, both desperately needing caffeine. Now we build something extraordinary, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, without hiding in the shadows. And Ethan? Still VP, still Kimberly's golden boy, but nowhere near our A. Project. Deshaun shook his head in amazement. You know, most people would have quit months ago, or exploded publicly, or sabotaged the presentation. I considered this as we waited for the light to change. Those options crossed my mind, but they wouldn't have served the work itself, which was always the most important thing to me. The work, he repeated thoughtfully. Not the credit? The credit matters, I admitted, but not as much as seeing the project reach its potential. As we entered the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a message from Tina Blake. Contracts being finalized today. Board already discussing expansion possibilities. You've earned this, Samantha. I showed the message to Deshaun, who raised an imaginary toast with his coffee cup. To Project Icarus, he said. May it fly high without melting its wings. I smiled, feeling the first real joy in months. To honest work honestly recognized. The journey ahead would be challenging, rebuilding team dynamics, regaining institutional trust, delivering on the system's promised capabilities. But for the first time since joining Lunaris, I would be walking in the light, my contributions visible and valued. Sometimes I reflected the most powerful response to theft isn't rage or revenge, but the simple, unassailable truth.